Our guest presenters today, we're joined by Dr. Uzo Anucha, who is our academic director here at YouthREX. She is an associate professor in the School of Social Work. I'm also joined by Corliss Bean, who's a research and evaluation specialist here at YouthREX. She's also a doctoral candidate at the University of Ottawa. I'm also joined by Jessica Noble, who is our Central Hub Research and Evaluation Manager. Welcome, presenters. So now, if you have any pressing questions before we get started with what we've prepared, I'd like to again invite you, and I will throughout, just to type any questions you might have right now. So this is the first question that we'll answer. The first question that came in, I'll direct to Dr. Anucha, and the question is, how can our small program with an even smaller budget justify spending resources on evaluation?
Thank you, Rebecca. That's actually a very important question and one that we hear very frequently. And we do understand that for a small program that already has so many challenges and has a small budget, evaluation may not seem like a really good use of resources. We do hear from youth workers frequently, complaining that it feels like evaluation just gets in the way of their work, that they understand as just working one-on-one with youth. We do get all those, we understand these concerns, but we also know that evaluation can be part of good practice, and that evaluation can support a youth program to do what they do even better. We really do believe that a youth program that is committed to improving youth well-being, like most small programs are, they are incredibly committed to the work they do with youth. That if a youth program wants to, is committed to that, then they're also going to be open to being reflective, reviewing what they do with youth, trying to understand how that is working for you so that they can do their work better. So rather than seeing evaluation as something that adds to the work people do, we tend to see evaluation as part of practice. And what we encourage the organizations we are working with YouthREX to do is think about the data you already collect. For example, your intake form. Your intake form can provide you with information around who your clients are, who your youth program participants are, their characteristics, which you can then link onto your process evaluation. You can also think of ways that your progress notes can help you describe the work you do. Coming to how much an evaluation costs, and if it's always that expensive, the scope of an evaluation can vary very widely depending on the size of your program. Our customized evaluation support work is usually with very small organizations, so we try to make sure that the evaluation plan we develop collaboratively with them is really suited to the size of their program. Finally, something very important to keep in mind when you're trying to decide whether you should do an evaluation or not is that evaluation provides you with a really good opportunity to hear from your program participants, how they're experiencing your program. So evaluation allows you to put your program participants in the center of your program, and in that way, evaluation can actually be reimagined as a part of practice.
Thanks, Uzo. Our next question that we received, I'll ask Corliss to answer. And the question is, our organization has more than one program. Do we have to evaluate all of them? If no, how do we choose which program to evaluate considering our tight budget?
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. And I think this is a great question and one that is relevant to many organizations. So I don't think that there's just one right answer for this question. So as an organization, I think it's important to ask yourself what it is that you want to get out of your evaluation, and think about doing something that's manageable for you as an organization, because unfortunately you can't do it all. So when selecting a program to evaluate, think about whether or not your organization has one main signature program that you want to focus on, or one that has a large amount of funding that's tied to it. So maybe it's a program that has been running for several years and is the most ready to be evaluated. However, on the flip side, you might want to select a program that is struggling and better understand why that program is happening. or why the program is struggling. So as I said, there's no one right answer for this question. However, the important thing to know is that know the capacity of your organization and don't try and do too much. So be comfortable with doing one thing well. So selecting that one program that you choose to evaluate, and instead of evaluating several different programs at a mediocre level.
Thanks, Corliss. The next question I'll pass to Dr. Anucha again. This person wrote in that they know that community buy-in before starting an evaluation is important, but they're having struggles with knowing where to start. So they're wondering, what are some effective strategies for getting community buy-in?
Getting buy-in from your stakeholders, your key stakeholders, is really important for a successful evaluation. What we do at YouthREX with the organizations we work is we encourage them that from the beginning, at the beginning of the evaluation, they start by carefully thinking through who these key stakeholder groups are, and then trying to decide what they think these groups need to know about the evaluation, and then thinking through how the different groups can actually support the evaluation. So the buy-in is really not just to, for them, getting that buy-in means that there are different ways that they can then support your evaluation. It makes it so much easier for you. For a youth program, 3 key stakeholder groups include youth participants, their parents and guardians, and then program staff, especially staff who may not have been involved in the decision to conduct an evaluation of a program. You want to make sure that they understand why the program is important to the organization. They know how the program is going to affect the work they do, and how it's going to support the work they do.
So I'm wondering, of those 3, specifically, do you have any advice on how to incorporate youth engagement into the evaluation process?
Yeah, there are various ways you can engage youth in an evaluation. Before, a very good place to start is to make sure that your program understands and has reflected on why you really want to engage youth in your evaluation. There's a bit of research that shows the benefits of engaging youth. It provides them opportunities for skill development, social competencies, self-confidence. There are also benefits to your own evaluation from engaging youth. It makes it easier for you to collect your data if they're engaged and committed to your evaluation. It makes it easier for you to interpret the findings from your evaluation. So being clear about these benefits, that engaging youth provides your participants and your evaluation, makes it easier to hang in when the challenges of youth engagement arise. I mean, engaging youth does bring with it some extra challenges for a program. We understand that. So being clear about the benefits helps to balance that. The next step, once you've decided that this is really worthwhile and worth doing, is to decide how you want to engage youth. Do you want to engage youth as just sources of data? You want them to complete surveys, you want them to do interviews, or do you want to engage youth as having them contribute to your evaluation? So you want them to sit on an advisory, you want them to give you feedback, you want them to help you choose measures, you want them to give you an idea what's going to work for that youth. So those are 2 kind of different ways of engaging youth. Regardless of what you want to do, some of the strategies will include being thoughtful about addressing some of the barriers that we know limit participation. So for example, providing stipends to reimburse them for their time, or a travel subsidy, paying them an hourly wage if they are contributing to your evaluation as an advisory member or research assistant. We sometimes get questions about, is it okay to pay youth honorarium for their participation? And at YouthREX, our answer is definitely yes. We do have an excellent fact sheet on 10 ways to meaningfully engage underrepresented youth, and actually we did a webinar some time ago on this. And number 5 reminds youth programs that providing youth with experience only is not a form of payment. Because sometimes youth programs think, well, we're providing them with a good experience and that's all there is. But you should also find ways to validate their contributions by compensating them for their time, effort, and the value they're adding to your program. But also you have to try and be realistic with the youth and upfront, and let them know what you can do, what's going to be in kind, what's going to be cash. Some specific strategies for engaging them to complete surveys or interviews include, as much as possible, trying to incorporate data collection into things that are already going on in your program. So instead of expecting youth to make 2 trips back to your program to do an evaluation, to do a program, you can do your focus group or administer your surveys when they're coming for a program. And try and remember that youth like to be engaged. Make the evaluation meaningful, so it's not seen as an extra burden. Provide them with as much information about the evaluation and the rationales for why you're doing that. That's one that we hear a lot from youth who are part of our noise program. So we try and explain to them what we're trying to do. During orientation, we tell them about the evaluation. We tell the parents about the evaluation. We tell them how we're going to use the findings, and be flexible with the deadlines and how you schedule, so that, it makes it easier for people to participate.
Thanks, Uzo. We just got a question that came in that's related. I think you answered it in part, but I'll share it to see if anything else comes up in your mind. This person has asked, do you have ideas for dealing with survey fatigue, the tendency of consumers or youth to feel inundated by surveys? This often leads to low response rates. In the fields of business, companies and corporations have a lot of money to come up with novel survey methods to increase consumer or youth response. How can underfunded nonprofits respond to this challenge? And I just wonder what you might say to that.
Well, that's a good question, and I think Corliss is going to touch upon that too when she talks about all the different creative ways that you can engage youth in data collection in addition to survey. But if you're doing a survey, one thing we're in the process of developing a measures inventory. If you go to our website, you see the criteria that we're paying attention to. One of the criteria that is really important to us is that the survey is not too long, that is youth friendly. So don't stick a 101 question survey in front of a youth when they don't have time and expect that they're going to finish it all. And start with, make sure that the survey is arranged in such a way that youth it makes sense to them and their lived experiences. And if you do have some funds, think of offering some stipends on incentives or gift cards or something that just tells people your time is valuable. We appreciate that, and we want you, and we take this survey seriously. Is worthwhile to us. But I think some of the consider other things apart from survey. Don't just think only of survey. Think of all the other creative ways that Corliss is going to talk about.
So let's go to. Do you want to go to Corliss now?
Sure. So one of the questions that did come in earlier was about asking about different types of creative tools for collecting data from youth. So there are a lot of different ways to do this instead of always using questionnaires, because fatigue is something that is a concern for youth participants quite often, and we often think that this is the gold standard, but there are a lot of other ways to do this. And I think if you want to use different qualitative tools, specifically, we know interviews work very well, or focus groups. So something that's similar to a focus group is something called the World Cafe method, and it's becoming quite common to use, especially with youth. So this is kind of a structured conversation process that can be used to facilitate discussion. And I think we'll post a resource after this webinar related to the World Cafe methods in case anybody is interested in doing this. As well, there's different arts-based methods that can be used. One specifically is photo voice, and I know YouthREX has done a webinar on this before, so we'll also post this as well. There's also other methods such as journaling, a graffiti mural, there's a lot of different reflection activities that can be done. And these are all tools that are going up on our measures inventory as well. So you can find out more information on those there. I think for community-based organizations that are often struggling or struggling with time and different resources, it's important to include these different types of creative tools as actual program activities. So you can do these as part of your regular program activities, and they can double as evaluation information for you to assess the program. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay, so do you have something else you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. So this is Jessica here. There was just something that I wanted to add in terms of survey fatigue and the question that was posed. So one thing that I think of when I think of kind of reducing that survey fatigue is possibly breaking up the surveys. So say if there's a demographic survey that you have incorporated into your evaluation, it might be easier to actually incorporate that demographic survey into the intake process. So if you have your participants complete intake forms, you might want to include some of those demographic questions into that so that you're able to collect data from all of your program participants, even if they aren't able to attend the research component. Additionally, you might want to consider having a day or a time that's specific just to the research component. So if you feel like the survey is long and that's just the way it is, there's no way to break it up, you might want to just specify one day where they come in. As Uzo was mentioning, there might be an incentive, so maybe there's food or some type of gift card that they receive, and they can come in, complete the survey, maybe have some type of program end celebration, and then they can go home, rather than having a whole day then of programming. That might help reduce it a little bit. Yeah.
Thanks, Jess. I have another question for you, which is about, someone has asked about the pros and cons of using an internal versus an external evaluator. Could you respond to that question?
Sure, awesome. Thanks, Rebecca, for posing that question. And I think this is a really important question. An external evaluator at times is also known as a third-party evaluator, and it's really not necessary to have an external evaluator for an evaluation. I'll explain the differences between an external evaluator and an internal evaluator, and they both have their pros and cons. So an external evaluator is someone who is hired to carry out the program evaluation and who is not or was not directly involved in the development or the operation of the program. And there are several pros with having an external evaluator. The first one is that they're fairly objective. So due to their lack of vested interest in the program, they're more likely to hold an objective standpoint when conducting the evaluation and thus have less biases. Also, because of the lack of involvement, they may have a more fresh perspective. So in other words, they may be able to think of more innovative solutions to reoccurring problems than someone who has been heavily involved in the program for several years. And finally, the participants, staff, volunteers, really anyone who's involved in the program, they may feel more comfortable to speak to someone who is not directly involved with the program. So they may be more open to discussing negative or touchy subjects to a person not connected to their program and that they know will maintain confidentiality. And despite all of those pros, there's definitely some cons as well. So they may lack insider knowledge behind the program history and just unaware of deeper reasoning for why certain challenges might be occurring. They may also lack certain program values, which might lead them to not understand why certain activities occur or really the values behind those activities. And finally, the project team might feel judged or discouraged by negative feedback from an outsider. So it's really important to understand that program evaluations are not meant to be judgmental or assessments of your work. The main objective really is to truly understand what is occurring in that program and potential program outcomes as well as methods for improvements. So next is the internal evaluator. And this is a person who's conducting the evaluation and is part of the program team. Some of the pros of having an internal evaluator include understanding the program inside out. So that includes day-to-day operation, decision-making procedures, and program history. They may also have a deeper understanding of program challenges and the reasons for why they continue to reoccur. And finally, they'll likely have the trust and cooperation from the project team, so therefore the project team might feel less judged. However, just like an external evaluator, there's also some cons. So they might find it difficult to criticize their work or identify challenges that they hadn't noticed before. Additionally, because they're involved in the program, those that are also involved might feel uncomfortable to express negative opinions about the program. And they might be less likely to hold a fresh perspective. So they might not be able to suggest innovative solutions to emerging or reoccurring challenges. And additionally, an external evaluator will likely hold some level of knowledge and expertise regarding evaluations, while it may be the first evaluation for the internal evaluator, and it might leave more room for errors or missed opportunities. So finally, as you all know, running a program is not an easy task, and with the heavy workload that many of the program leads already have, conducting an evaluation might be really taxing on a person who already has a lot going on with the program. So just one point, it's important to remember that when deciding whether to have an internal or external evaluator, it truly doesn't have to be an either-or situation. So here at YouthREX, we really emphasize the importance of involving key stakeholders in the program evaluation process. So that can include having an external evaluator and then really incorporating the internal project team. So this helps to build the evaluation capacity of the project team, and it ensures that we're fulfilling the evaluation objective in the most appropriate manner for that specific program.
Thanks, Jess. This is another one for you because you are the hub manager for the Central region. I think that you can speak to this question the best. Someone is asking, if our organization decides to engage YouthREX, can you tell us what the beginning steps look like? How do we connect? What happens?
Sure, that's a great question. So to begin, first of all, you can call us if you have any questions at all, if you need us to explain this to you further. But basically, you can head to our website and you can fill out an application form. So that will just ask about your program. It asks a number of different questions, so kind of some background information, if you're nonprofit, some of your funding opportunities that you guys have. And from there, we go and review the application, and we basically, as a research team, will come together and see if you're eligible for free evaluation services from YouthREX. So are you youth-oriented? Is it grassroots or community-based? And then from there, you will receive, within, I'd say, 5 business days, you receive either an acceptance email, and then we move to basically what we call the discovery phase. So you'll fill out a survey that just assesses your evaluation capacity. So that asks whether you've done evaluation before, how your program feels about evaluation. And you also will fill out our agreement, so you kind of learn more about what YouthREX is about and what the process will be like, the evaluation process. And then we work together to create an evaluation plan, create a logic model for your program, and
and an evaluation plan, and put the evaluation plan into place, and complete an evaluation. And Uzo would like to add.
Actually, if you go to the website, we do have a couple of documents that shows you what that process looks like. One of the things we do for our customized evaluation support organizations, we follow a 7-step evaluation model that starts from the discovery phase, as Jessica explained, and goes all the way to, you collect your data, and then, to the legacy phase, where you then spend time trying to understand how you want to use the findings. Three key things that are really important to us in our evaluation work is encouraging youth organizations to make sure that they involve youth in their evaluation, for those reasons we talked about in the beginning. They're also encouraging them to see evaluation as an opportunity to collect not just data, but also stories about their program, so that they're better able to understand the work they do. And then the third one is, what's the third one? The learning centered, making sure that the evaluation contributes to learning. We firmly believe that evaluation shouldn't just be for proving the work you do, but it should be to improve the work you do for youth well-being. Right?
You can also refer, if you're interested, we did an entire webinar on our evaluation service processes. It's under our webinar evaluation series. It's the second of our evaluation series 1. It's 2 of 3, so you can listen to a whole hour of our hub managers describing in detail what every step looks like. At this point, I will turn the questions over to Corliss, and I will ask Corliss a question that came in. What are the pros and cons of quantitative and qualitative methods? Someone wants to know.
Perfect. So when we think about quantitative methods, I think a lot of us think about those surveys and those questionnaires. And when we think about those, they seem to be the most objective, or as I said before, that gold standard that we look towards kind of automatically using. And by doing this, it allows us to often gather data from a large group. It can be gathered fairly quickly. It allows you to use that previously validated tool based on the outcome that you hope to assess. It allows you to examine cause and effect or to generalize your findings, but beyond just what your program is. And then using surveys also allows you to, the people that complete them, to be anonymous. However, although it allows you to understand what is happening, it doesn't necessarily explain why something is happening. So just because, you get at kind of what the outcome actually is, but not necessarily understanding the reasons behind those outcomes, which is where qualitative comes in. One of the other things about doing program evaluation and using quantitative methods is that the different statistical analyses that are used sometimes can be pretty advanced, and for different people doing these evaluations, that knowledge may extend beyond the evaluator's capacity, so something just to kind of keep in mind. But there's the benefits of just using mean scores and averages. So in terms of using qualitative methods for evaluation, these are more subjective methods, but they describe a point of view of the person that's actually experiencing that situation. So whether it's the youth perspective in their experience from the program, or it might be the parent giving kind of their outsider perspective of the youth and their experiences in the program. All of these provide in-depth accounts and really provide rich data that you can really explore those lived experiences that you can't get within quantitative data. So this is really getting at why things are happening as well as what. Qualitative data is ideal with a smaller sample, which is quite often a lot of the youth programs that YouthREX works with are these smaller programs. However, they might be time consuming for both the evaluators and participants, so something to kind of keep in mind with that. However, it is contextualized specifically to your program and allows for a lot of flexibility. So when I speak about flexibility, I mean that if you're doing interviews, you can add or remove different questions. If you see something kind of comes up or something that's interested, you can probe for additional questions. Or other arts-based methods, the actual processes can be pretty flexible and can be modified based on your program evaluation needs. It's important to note that both quantitative and qualitative methods obviously have their strengths and weaknesses, but combining them together is kind of the ideal approach and that gold standard so that you can offset the weaknesses of each approach. So at YouthREX, we encourage the use of both using qualitative and quantitative data for our evaluation to help build rigor. I think I'll stop there because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I know there are a lot of resources available online, including what's in our toolkit, so I encourage you to check that out.
Thanks, Corliss. Someone has asked, okay, I see the differences between quantitative and qualitative methods, but what would make sense for a very small program?
Okay, I am a big advocate for collecting qualitative data and allowing the stakeholders' voices to be heard within that. So whether this be through interviews or focus groups or arts-based methods, I think just really taking the time to understand their experiences at an in-depth level is ideal for small programs. As I previously mentioned, if you are a small organization, building evaluation into those regular program activities has its benefit. So using a program time to actually do the activities like doing photo voice as a program activity, or maybe it's the graffiti wall, or you just take time to do a focus group as part of it. I think this really has that benefit of doubling as both a program activity and an evaluation component as well. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with doing questionnaires within a smaller group. However, just understanding the limitations that come from analyzing data within a small group, I think that's where you need to be careful.
What are those limitations?
Yeah, I think in terms of like doing statistical analyses, if you were to try and do pre-post with, say, a small sample size of 10 or something like that, it would be very challenging to understand what significance is, or if your program is producing a significant change. So I think I said it before about looking at mean scores. Mean scores or averages can tell you a lot about what is going on in the program. So I wouldn't discourage you from using questionnaires, but then maybe questionnaires in combination with a qualitative method like a focus group or interviews, I think would be great.
Thanks, Corliss. I'm now going to turn it back to Jess Noble. Jess, we have a question here that's about some of the language we hear in evaluation. We hear about process, outcome, and impact evaluations. This person is wondering, what is the difference between all these types of evaluations?
What a great question, Rebecca. So it's really important to be aware of the differences with each evaluation type. So remember, you want to choose a type of evaluation that best meets your evaluation objective and the unique aspects of your program. So first, let's start with process evaluation, which is also known as formative evaluation. A process evaluation assesses the process of implementing your program and usually occurs throughout the implementation. So this includes the early planning stages, during outreach and recruitment, and the initial implementation of activities. So this type of evaluation answers the question, what is currently working well with our program, and what is not working so well, and how can we improve it? The process evaluation involves understanding the implementation plan, the activities that were planned versus what actually was implemented, and noting missed activities and why. Process evaluation also includes monitoring program activities. So for example, what is the attendance rates of participants? What activities are occurring and how often are they occurring? Finally, rather than waiting until the end of the program to discuss program challenges, a process evaluation allows for quicker identification of emerging challenges and a more rapid application of solutions. Some methods of collecting this information could be ongoing anonymous feedback forms or monthly focus groups with staff or participants to discuss how things are going and any challenges that might be emerging. So then now let's talk about an outcome evaluation, which is also known as a summative evaluation. So this form of evaluation seeks to assess the changes that occurred as a result of the program. This answers the question, has the program met its intended outcomes and program goals? So think back to when you were in school. Remember that big final exam at the end of the year that tested the knowledge that you acquired through a specific course? That's similar to an outcome evaluation. Basically, it aims to answer the questions, what did participants get out of this program? And lastly, there's an impact evaluation, which assesses the potential long-term outcomes for program users. This answers the question, were there any outcomes for program users that occurred after the program was completed, or that they were able to transfer to other areas of their life long after participating in the program? In order to assess the long-term impact of a program, data would need to be collected from alumni of the program. This could be done through a one-time follow-up evaluation or a longitudinal study in which participants are tracked for a number of years and potentially interviewed or complete surveys multiple times. It should be noted that it's not actually as linear as this. So your evaluation objectives really guide the selection of the type of evaluation you conduct. The type of evaluation then determines your evaluation questions, and once you decided on that, you'll be seeking what type of evaluations you'll be seeking. You'll determine which methods and measures would be best to use for your specific program.
Thanks. I have another question that has come in, which is about baseline data, and I'm going to ask that to Dr. Anucha. So the question is, well, they provide some context that their youth program is already running. They didn't collect baseline data. They're wondering if they can still think about evaluating how their program participants have changed as a result of their program, or do they have to wait till the next round of running the program?
If your evaluation plan was not ready before your program started, like we see frequently with several of our CES clients, you can still do an evaluation. You can still, there are other designs that you can use to evaluate your program. Just to keep in mind that before and after design, pre and post, where you have baseline data, that allows you to compare your program participants' knowledge, attitudes, and behavior before the program, which is a baseline, and after. having the baseline is still not enough to then attribute any observed changes to your program. Sometimes people think, well, because I did it, I have baseline and then I did an evaluation, any changes I see, I can say that these changes are due to my program. To be able to make those kind of claims, you have to be able to eliminate all the other explanations that could have been responsible for the changes you're observing. And the only way you can do that is using experimental designs that are mostly not appropriate for the majority of nonprofit programs. So I think it's really, the important thing is when you're developing your evaluation plan, before you begin your evaluation, is to ask yourself, what kind of claims are you trying to make with your evaluation? What kind of, what do you want to know from your evaluation? So if you don't collect baseline data, that's okay. The other designs that can then still provide you with information that are good enough. So in the absence of an experimental design, that is the only way you can actually say in a conclusive way these changes are due to your program. You can use non-experimental designs. You can use quasi-experimental designs that are kind of suitable for youth programs. And they help you answer questions such as, what degree is the program achieving its outcome? For example, how much change? You can use any non-experimental design to do that. Even although you won't be able to say that change you're observing again is due to your program. Different designs will be able to allow you to understand how long the changes you observe with youth they last. Are there differences between people who participate in your program and people who don't participate? You can use quasi-experimental design where you compare them to other similar groups. It doesn't have to be an experimental design for you to do that. So one thing we do emphasize here at YouthREX is, in the absence of experimental designs, one way you can build in rigor into your design is by trying to have multiple lines of evidence from different methods and data sources. So instead of doing just a focus group, one focus group with youth, you could do a focus group with youth, you could do interviews with their parents, you could have them, you could include some creative arts-based methods. When all these different methods tell you the same thing, then it gives you a lot more confidence that what you're seeing might actually be, due to accurately represents the experience of youth.
Thanks, Uzo. We have a new question that came in. I'm going to first pose it to Corliss, and then if anyone else on the panel has anything they'd like to add to the question, please join in. So the question is about kind of pick and choose your own survey. So the person has asked, do you have any experience with using a basket of questions for an evaluation so that agencies can choose which questions they would like to ask their participants? Do you have any recommendations when planning this type of an evaluation? So Corliss, if you could start off, and then if anyone else would like to join in.
Yeah, definitely. So this is actually kind of, we do this a lot, and while it is the gold standard, I guess, or the ideal situation to use to use a standardized or validated questionnaire, in practice, that's not always feasible for organizations, or if they have multiple outcomes that they want to assess, to have one questionnaire on each of these outcomes. Again, we'll get into the issue of participant fatigue. So working with a lot of the CES clients, basically what we do is we give them a bank of different questions that has been used within a validated or reliable measure. And then they pick which ones they feel best align with their program goals or what they want to assess. So, I mean, in practice, I think that is kind of for youth organizations. I think this is the kind of best way to go in that way, so that you are really targeting those outcomes, because these validated questionnaires were not like only validated for one specific outcome, whereas your program is probably assessing multiple outcomes. So I think kind of picking and choosing what works best is in practice the best way to go. It's just important to remember that this by doing this, it kind of eliminates the validity and reliability of these measures. So what I mean by that is by picking just 5 out of 15 questions that assess self-efficacy, the tool itself was validated by using or represents self-efficacy as a whole within those 15 questions, but by only choosing 5, you won't be using a validated measure anymore. But I think for these, for grassroots programs, I don't think that is as much of a concern as what it is in the research field. So I think do what's best and what works best within your organization.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
No. I think she nailed it.
I would just add that we are creating a inventory of measures that people can check out, and within the inventory you can see a whole variety of different scales that are open access and that you can use. And so if you're looking for a basket related to youth outcomes, we are developing that, but with the caveat that, you know, when we do adapt it to your specific context and to respond to the outcomes that you're looking at, the validity changes, but validity, it just may not have been tested yet in your particular context. So we have another question. Oh, this is a collective impact question. So I'll pass it to Dr. Anucha. This is a question that the question is, for a network of youth-serving organizations, what would be a good first step in finding a common measure to assess the effectiveness of the system or sector?
I guess the first challenge for a collective impact, whether it's a network or, you know, couple of several programs, is trying to agree on what the common outcomes will be, and then that those common outcomes are being defined in the same way by all the different organizations, because and so that you then, you know, based on those common outcomes, you're very clear what your indicators are. You're also very clear where you think the different groups are, or where the community is. Once you've identified the common, you agree on a common outcome that you think you can all define the same way, it becomes easier, you know, the task then becomes easier to find a common measure that everyone agrees measures the same thing in the same way, so that you can then use, so that there is something that you all share together. The difficulty is in definition, in trying to decide what those outcomes mean, how you're going to measure them. If you do that and there's clarity around that, it's so much easier to find a measure that everyone would agree on.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been reading about collective impact in particular, not necessarily the networks of groups, but I know that the Stanford
Social
Innovation Lab has put out kind of new recommendations for measurement that get at processes across the network, rather in addition to shared outcomes. So that's some interesting reading to follow up on. Okay, if there are any more questions, I invite people to type them in. We have a couple more prepared, but we're running out of time for the hour. We have about 10 minutes left, so if you have any burning questions, please share them. For the moment, however, I will move on to number 9. This one goes to Jess Noble. What are some other ways we can share our evaluation findings instead of a long and boring report that no one will read?
Thanks, Rebecca. So sharing your evaluation findings is really important. I find that sometimes this step might get forgotten or pushed to the side, but I think it's really important to share your findings back to the community. So there's many different types of methods that you can use to convey the evaluation findings back to the community and the program users. So at YouthREX, we call this the legacy stage, and this is a really important part of the program evaluation process. You really want to ensure that those that participated were heard and the information and feedback that they provided will be put to good use. It's important to choose a method of reporting that best fits your intended audience. So after spending 2 decades in school, I can definitely tell you that a lengthy report is definitely not the best way to report your findings and hold the attention of your audience. So some fun methods of reporting your findings include hosting a presentation or a workshop. So you can explain the evaluation process, so what was done and why, and what did you learn, and how were the youth involved. This is a great time to share some awesome quotes or findings about your program and to raise awareness about what occurs in your program and some positive outcomes that might have emerged. It's also a great time to share some changes that will occur within your program as a result of the evaluation and the feedback you received. Additionally, you can also have an interactive format of reporting with a workshop component where parents of those involved or even community members can come and join and offer their recommendations or even ask more questions about your program. So another idea is to have a short video clip. So as Corliss was discussing some of those creative arts-based methods, it would be great to kind of incorporate that into the show, into showing or revealing your findings. So you can have some type of showcase that displays that information, of course, with the participants' consent. Some other accessible formats could be brochures or pamphlets, as well as a newsletter format. And these resources can be provided to funders, community members, interested potential participants, or parents, and it really tells the story of your program. Additionally, an infographic is a great tool to use to display information about your program. And all of these tools can be made available on your website if you have one, or it could even be posted at the location of your program. And visual tools are just a really great way to provide a snapshot of your program, especially for people that might be unfamiliar with it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jess. We're closing out our hour, and so again, I'll put the call out, but at this point, I'll pass it over to Dr. Anucha. We have a final question that we identified of the ones that came in. This person asks, how do we communicate findings to youth to address their concerns about being over-evaluated? I know we spoke a bit about youth being over-evaluated, but if you could go a little bit more in depth about how you communicate findings with them?
Yeah, sure. So some of the strategies we talked about at the beginning around engaging youth in evaluation also work in making sure that you're addressing their concerns about feeling evaluated. So for example, making sure that data collection is not too burdensome on youth by building it into your programming, trying to make sure that you're making evaluation meaningful for them. One thing that we haven't talked about is that your engaging you should not stop at when your data collection finishes, because sometimes people spend so much time, they engage youth turn out, they do a focus group, they complete a survey, but then they don't hear anything else. You also have to think about how do you then share findings with youth. So tell them what the key findings that came out, how your program is going to use the findings, or even if those findings kind of reinforce what you're doing and you're going to keep on doing that. For example, I know whenever at the end of our noise year, the youth program, YouthREX runs, we do focus groups with youth, and the first year we did the focus group, they talked about what makes noise so much fun. They're like friends, food, and so we're like, okay, the food is really important. So whenever we do an event, we pay attention to the food, and so making sure that you tell them, so we, every year at the beginning, we explain to them, this is what we had last year from you, this is how we're going to use that. So, then they feel that the evaluation, their input is actually meaningful and is taken seriously. If they don't hear from you, the next time you go back to say, can you attend a focus group or complete a survey, they'll be like, oh, not again. What's the point of all this? You want them to be able to see the point of all the questions you ask them, how it helps you improve the program you're on. Yeah.
Thanks, Uzo. Mm-hmm. And one last final call for any questions. Well, if there aren't any, I will thank our presenters and let everyone know that we're going to we'll be posting our full questions on our website. And also, I'd like to invite you to our next webinar, which is on Thursday, September the 1st from 12 to 1. The theme is supporting trans youth well-being, and we'll be joined by the lead investigator for a national survey from British Columbia about trans health. A very interesting study, has lots of implications for the youth sector, and we'll also be joined by one of our YouthREX team members who was the author of our Research to Practice report that we will be launching in the next couple of weeks on supporting trans youth well-being. So I encourage you to sign up, tell your friends, and hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.